And of course, this week we did the same thing we did last week, which was we have a mutual thing of the week, and we picked this movie mainly because the star of the movie is Jonathan Majors, and we talked about him last week with regards to like Creed 3 and Quantum Mania. Him kind of being propped up quite a bit by the media, and
Yep.
and then we realized we had actually never seen him in anything.
Right. Like seeing the clips from Loki out of context are, well, out of context.
Exactly, yeah. So we decided to watch this movie, which is on Paramount Plus.
Yep. Although after the response we got to RRR, maybe we should switch over to being a Bollywood and Tollywood channel.
Yeah. Yeah, because that ended up being our most popular video.
Yep.
But yeah, so we watched Devotion, based, or I should say, inspired by a true story. And it's during the Korean War, which is kind of interesting because there aren't very many movies about the Korean War.
No. Which is interesting because I guess it's like there aren't all that many movies about World War One.
That's true, yeah. And oddly enough, the American Revolution.
Yeah, I think I wonder if that there I'm babbling. I wonder if part of the American Revolution one is that it would only really play in America,
Mm, that's
which,
true. Yeah.
which might also be the problem with Korean War ones. Although,
Well, I
I,
mean,
when you look at it, World War II is like a rare one where, well, you've got the losers with Mustache Man.
mhm.
Uh, it's easy to you can basically have anybody fighting them. You can even
Yeah.
have like whole movies about Soviets fighting them, and it's like, okay, well, I don't usually like the Soviets, but if they're fighting the Mustache Man, then I guess we're good with them.
Yeah. 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 And well, unless it's about the Pacific part of World War II, which
Right. Fun thing. I was watching something about the history of Toei films, not Toei, excuse me, Toho films, the people who made Godzilla.
yeah.
They were masters of miniatures, just even outside of their monster movies. They had made a movie about the bombing of Pearl Harbor
Yeah.
that the special effects were so realistic for the time that when during I think it was during the Japanese occupation or the American occupation of Japan after the war, the film was seized for a bit because they thought it had actual footage.
Oh. Wow. Jeez.
Until they realized no, it's just a model.
This is model. D. Ryan says Ash versus Army of Hitler. I'd watch that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get Bruce Campbell on the phone.
So let's get back to the movie we're actually reviewing.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, like Daniel mentioned, this is based on a real story. And would it be fair to say that if this was just made up, this movie would feel really contrived?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes.
It's one of the things where I haven't looked into this. So this is the life of Jesse Owen. Was it Owen or Owens?
Jesse Brown was his name.
Brown?
Jesse Owen is he was
Oh,
the Olympic
oh, you're
athlete.
right. That's right. They mentioned Jesse Owens at one point.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Jesse Brown.
That's right.
Which, okay, not to criticize the guy's last name, but that is also kind of like if you gave me that name for an African American Air Force pilot in the war in a novel that you had completely made up yourself, it's like you can do a little better than Jesse Brown. Come on,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a little on the nose.
Yeah, just a little.
But it's basically covers his meeting and friendship with the other pilot here, played by Glenn Powell of Top Gun Maverick fame,
Yeah.
who who I do not remember the name of his character in the movie.
Tom something.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because while uh, while Jesse over here is portrayed as larger in the movie poster. As I thought back on it this afternoon, there's way more deuteragonists than there being a single protagonist.
Hmm. Yeah,
Do you think that would be fair to say?
I think so. Yeah.
Because they do take turns being the point of view character.
Yeah, they do. And it's, you kind of, yeah, it goes in with like, like with with Jesse Brown, that's Jonathan Majors.
Hmm.
They show his home life, which I like those scenes with him, with him and his wife and his daughter, and
Yeah,
yeah,
the daughter, what she was like, what, one or two?
yeah, maybe two, yeah,
Yeah, she didn't really seem to emote when like her daddy was holding her, or mommy was holding her. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
children and animals, as they say. It's hard to get performances out of them.
right, yeah,
She was almost more like a prop.
yeah. Well, yeah. It's hard to get a good performance out of a toddler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now his wife, on the other hand, was very well portrayed.
Hmm.
Uh, like you could really feel the chemistry between them. It was fun watching them interact. And when she got bad news, she was good at acting pretty devastated.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course then you got Glenn Powell's character, and he's kind of shown as being somewhat an elitist, if you will, I guess, because he went to the Naval Academy, and for those of you who don't know, the Naval Academy is very hard to get into.
You might say you have to be a Top Gun to get in there.
Yeah.
It- you, I almost wonder if whoever wrote the Top Gun originally had this guy in mind, because he does seem kind of like a prototypical, uh, well, maverick.
Maverick. Yeah. Yeah, very similar. Yeah. So like when the movie starts off, I think we meet Glenn Powell's character first, and then he's in the
Right.
locker room, and he hears, Jonathan Majors, yelling, doesn't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
yelling strangely like "Get out of here!"
Yeah.
Uh,
And then he pops it, and he comes around the corner, and he's just like, yeah, everything's fine. Yeah.
he's very Majors comes off as very cold and aloof when he meets him,
Yeah.
uh, and let's hear. So this is one that's you challenge, or it's a challenge to review it without spoiling it or just recounting every scene, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
there isn't necessarily a how to put it. There isn't necessarily a how to put it. If this was like a if this was a story you contrived, like if you just said, oh, I'm going to make a story about an integrated squadron with a single African American pilot fighting in the Korean War,
Hmm.
there's a lot of beats that feel like extremely predictable. That's because real life can be predictable sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, like there's I'll just say that there's a scene where a pilot has a flying accident, and I think that you could kind of immediately tell that something wasn't going to go right with that scene.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as that started happening, I went, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, it was almost more like because because the scene was happening at all, you knew something bad was going to happen, because you wouldn't have a scene of a entirely ordinary flight check.
Yeah. Yeah. It because that would make for a very dull movie.
Yep. And actually, I was just thinking that there's something incongruous about Jonathan Major's portrayal of the character, but then something hit me. So I was about to say it's very strange because Jesse is always portrayed as being extremely bold behind the cockpit, but but in person he's always kind of controlled and aloof. Then I realized,
Yeah.
oh, of course, behind the cockpit is where he can cut loose a little bit.
Right.
He doesn't have to worry about the racism of the age or dealing with. I think that's also part of probably why he was cold and aloof when he met Glenn's character, because you know, okay, is this guy? How is this guy going to treat me?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume he's going to treat me badly until I learn
Yeah.
otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, and him, being in the cockpit, that's where he can be himself.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course well, I don't want to. This might be like a slight spoiler, but he does have as former President Jimmy Carter would say, a crisis of confidence
Mm-hmm.
when they have to fly this new airplane,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very challenging plane to fly, and he doesn't know if he can do it or not.
Yeah, and so how to put this? There's a very interesting scene where he's like ignoring the flight guy, because they have a guy out there with the flags just directing him how to land on the aircraft carrier, and he
Right.
seems to be ignoring him at first. And he confesses, "I can't necessarily trust the white. Yeah, he can't trust the white people to actually give him proper instructions,
Right.
or at least he
Yeah.
feels like he can't trust."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because he's had a lot of bad experience. Yeah. He had a lot of bad experiences during his training.
Right.
And
And on top of that, he because of the shape of the Corsair here, aka the Widowmaker, you can't really see what you're doing when you land.
mhm,
So you have to have that trust.
right. Yeah, and that's very difficult for him. Yeah.
Yep.
And
Um,
yeah, but yeah, and of course a lot of this he ends up telling to Glenn's character, because that's because he has a hard time opening up, because he can't really open up to the other members of the squad, but he's able to do it with Glenn, for one reason or another. I guess it's because that one, the first time they flew out there, he kind of saw what he was made of and went, okay, maybe he knows what he's doing.
and also, you know, Glenn was good with his wife and kids, so
Hmm.
when he happened to go over.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Um, so of course, when you have this sort of biography, it's hard to decide whether to spoil or not.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I will just say, in the last 6 months, if I had a nickel for every movie I saw where a naval pilot crashed his plane in a snowy alpine forest and his buddy came after him to try to help him out, I'd have two nickels. But it's weird that it happened twice, because that's the end part of Top Gun Maverick too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, of course, and of course he adds to the fact that Glenn Powell was in both movies.
Yes, although he wasn't one of the main characters in Top Gun Maverick, but
True.
so
Yeah.
Glenn Powell is specifically getting typecast as a Navy Air Force pilot. So,
Yeah.
a naval pilot. So be careful, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although I will say he plays a completely different character in this movie than he did in Maverick.
Oh, yeah, no, in Maverick. He was basically the new
Iceman.
Iceman. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was about to say Goose. I was like, that isn't remotely right. In
Yeah.
this one, he basically is the wingman.
Yeah.
So to kind of go back to our original purpose for watching this, Jonathan Majors, will he Kang? Did this performance? Did you see anything that made you think that he'd be able to be a compelling villain on the level of Thanos?
On the level of Thanos, I'm not so sure. I think he can play a compelling villain.
Hmm.
I think if he plays a version of Kang that is very just top down top down baddie. I think he can pull that off. Now, I don't see him being necessarily being as menacing as Thanos.
Yeah. Uh, he's very good at playing, again, cold and aloof with
Hmm.
moments of humor.
Yeah,
I think that the problem is, of course, now you've seen the version of him that was beaten by Loki, and now you've seen the version of him that was beaten by an army of ants.
yeah,
So it almost feels like the next movie, the trajectory to do would be to have somebody not take him seriously, him laugh along with it, then kind of do the equivalent of the Joker's disappearing pen trick from The Dark Knight.
yeah,
Like just flip out in a way that seems a bit calm and collected at the time.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know who that they would do that with. I guess like maybe the Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, you want to make him everyone's favorite villain? Carol Danvers. Have him kill Carol Danvers in his first appearance with her.
There you
That would make
go.
people pay attention and be a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I feel like there were some scenes where he was looking at himself in the mirror, because this is one of those things I was talking about where if you had come to me with this movie, I would have said, okay, that's a little bit on the nose.
Mhm.
Where he one of his habits is that he writes down every racist thing somebody says to him and he repeats himself to him in the mirror. It isn't exactly said why he does this. It's almost like it's to take away the power of it.
I think so, and I think it's to psych him. I think he does it to psych himself up
Which,
before
boy,
going. Yeah.
that's a complicated psychology there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like professional athletes do kind of something similar
Hmm.
before they, like football players, they'll look themselves in the mirror and say a bunch of stuff to them, to them, to their reflection before they go out. It's a
Yeah. But in those mirror scenes, you do see a nice range of emotion, and it's like some like real anger and fire coming out of him.
yeah,
So I think that if they give him good stuff to work with, he could end up being a compelling villain. It's just, well, they keep hiring Rick and Morty writers whose idea of compelling is amusing and subverting expectations.
yeah, yeah,
So I think that we can answer our question partially with, while they might be astroturfing Jonathan Majors, he does bring it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's got the acting chops. Yeah,
Uh, I would say that compared to him, Glenn is almost kind of. If I hadn't also seen him in Maverick, I might have said he didn't have much range. That's because he's a semi-supporting character who is mostly there to elicit stuff from Jesse.
right.
So now let's. I decided to look this up as we started because I was wondering, how did this do? Well, 20 million box office total. And it launched in, I think, November 23rd, and international of a little under
800.
$1 million.
Mm,
So this was probably a sizable bomb, although uh, Netflix, or I think this was a Sony film, so I think Netflix might have paid for some of it if they ended up on their streaming service. Although the fact that it's on uh,
Paramount
Paramount
Plus.
Plus tells us that actually, yeah, Sony Pictures. So somebody cut him a check to get the streaming rights. So
Yeah.
that might be doing all right. Although I think this would have probably been a pretty expensive movie to make. There's a lot of special effects.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably put this movie somewhere in the 100 million range.
Yeah. So we were talking about earlier where certain war movies might not play much outside of the U.S. I think we just made our case there,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
because I think this is a movie that deserves to be seen. It's just it's a somber movie. It's a very somber movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too, it kind of gave me a little bit of inspiration to just go out and I haven't looked yet, but maybe there, to see if there are any like documentaries out there about this, about Jesse Brown and this squadron.
Right. I mean, we're giving some of the what feel like contrived elements a bit of credit because it's probably in the history books. If we look it up and some of this stuff didn't actually happen, that's like, okay, that's so on the nose modern Hollywood screenwriting that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely give it a recommend. You know,
Yep. Not as relentlessly entertaining as RRR, but they can't
yeah,
all be.
yeah, yeah.